The transmission crackled through static at 3:47 hours, Eastern Afghanistan. Any station, this is Falcon 6-1. We are taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Grid reference follows. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane, a 12-year SEAL veteran who had never once called for immediate air support in his career. Tonight was different. Tonight, 16 of America's finest were pinned down on a ridge that wasn't supposed to exist on any map, facing an enemy force that intelligence had assured them was 3 valleys away. The operation had been clean, surgical: extract the high-value target, disappear into the night. Instead, they'd walked into what Kane would later describe as the devil's own firing range. 300 miles away, Major Ripley Ghost Novik sat in the cockpit of her F-15E Strike Eagle, engines idling on the tarmac of Bagram Airfield. She had been on standby for 6 hours, watching the amber glow of her instruments while younger pilots rotated through hot sorties. At 34, Ghost was considered past her prime by squadron standards, too old to be aggressive, too experienced to be reckless. Her call sign had started as mockery. She appeared and disappeared from conflicts so quietly that ground forces sometimes questioned whether she'd been there at all. What they didn't know was that Ghost preferred it that way. Precision over spectacle, results over recognition. The radio erupted again. Falcon 6-1 to any available close air support. We have wounded, repeat, we have wounded. Requesting immediate. The transmission cut to white noise. In the Tactical Operations Center, controllers scrambled to reestablish contact while Ghost's crew chief, Sergeant Maya Volkov, appeared at her wingtip with that particular expression that meant everything was about to change. Major, they're spinning you up. SEALs are compromised on the Kunar border. No other assets available. Ghost's hands moved to her pre-flight checklist before her conscious mind had fully processed the words. The F-15E Strike Eagle wasn't just an aircraft. It was 23 tons of precision death wrapped around the most advanced targeting systems America had ever built. Tonight, those systems would be guided by a pilot whose record spoke in whispers rather than headlines, whose previous missions were classified so deeply that even she sometimes wondered if they had actually happened. As Ghost's engine spooled to full power, casting dancing shadows across the runway, she had no way of knowing that in 6 hours, her call sign would shift from mockery to legend, or that 16 Navy SEALs would owe their lives to a woman the Air Force had been quietly pushing toward retirement. Ghost lifted off into darkness, carrying 2,000 pounds of ordnance and the weight of unfinished business with a sky that had never quite learned to fear her. Until tonight. The flight to the Kunar province took 43 minutes at full military power, the Strike Eagle cutting through thin mountain air like a steel prayer. Ghost maintained radio silence. Her WSO, Weapons Systems Officer Captain Dmitry "Tank" Kozlov, cycling through targeting solutions while monitoring multiple encrypted channels. They'd flown together for 3 years, long enough for Tank to recognize the particular quality of Ghost's focus when lives hung in the balance. She flew differently on rescue missions, with a surgical precision that bordered on the supernatural. "Ghost, this is Overlord," came the voice of Colonel Harrison from Tactical Command. "Be advised, Falcon 6-1 has been dark for 27 minutes. Last known position ridgeline 7 clicks north of Asadabad. Enemy strength estimated at 40 to 60 fighters, well entrenched, multiple crew-served weapons." Tank watched Ghost's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. In the 3 years they'd flown together, he'd learned to read her micro-expressions like sacred text. The slight narrowing of her eyes meant she was calculating angles of attack. The way her left hand rested motionless on the throttle meant she was already visualizing the target area. "Overlord Ghost copies all. What's my clearance to engage?" Her voice carried that particular calm that Tank had heard only a handful of times, the voice of someone who had stared death in the face so often they'd become old acquaintances. "Negative, Ghost. You are cleared for reconnaissance only until we re-establish contact with Falcon. Row requires positive identification of friendly positions before weapons release. Tank felt rather than saw Ghost's frustration. Rules of engagement existed for good reasons, but good reasons didn't stop bullets or save bleeding SEALs. 20 minutes later, they were orbiting at 15,000 feet above terrain that looked like God's own definition of hostile. The Kunar province was a maze of ridges and valleys where empires came to die, where Soviet helicopters still rusted in hidden caves and American technology learned the limits of its reach. Through their advanced targeting pod, they could see muzzle flashes scattered across a horseshoe-shaped ridge, creating a deadly constellation in the darkness. "Jesus," Tank whispered, studying the thermal imaging. "They're completely surrounded." The SEALs were positioned in a shallow depression near the ridge's eastern edge, return fire sporadic and weakening. Even through the infrared display, Tank could see bodies that weren't moving. Ghost said nothing, but her breathing had changed to the measured rhythm he recognized from their most dangerous missions. Suddenly, a weak transmission penetrated the static. Any station, Falcon 6-1, ammunition critical, casualties mounting." It was Kane's voice, barely recognizable through pain and exhaustion. The moment stretched like a held breath between heaven and earth. 16 American lives balanced against rules written by people who had never heard bullets sing their deadly song in the thin air of Afghanistan's mountains. The transmission that followed would be analyzed by military historians for decades. "Falcon 6-1, this is Ghost. I have eyes on your position. Stand by for immediate close air support." Tank's head snapped toward Ghost, knowing what that transmission meant. She had just violated direct orders from a full colonel, committed herself to an engagement without authorization, and potentially ended her 20-year military career. But Tank also knew something else. If anyone could thread the needle between friendlies and hostiles in mountainous terrain with minimal visibility, it was the pilot whose call sign had evolved from insult to grudging respect among ground forces who'd seen her work. "Ghost Overlord, you are ordered to maintain reconnaissance altitude. Do not engage without clear row authorization." Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the radio with crystalline authority. Ghost's response was equally clear. "Overlord Ghost. Falcon 6-1 has wounded and is nearly Winchester on ammunition. I am the only available asset. Request immediate clearance to engage." The silence that followed lasted exactly 17 seconds. Tank counted them on the mission clock. 17 seconds while Americans bled on a ridge that cartographers had forgotten to name. When Harrison's voice returned, it carried the weight of command decision. "Ghost Overlord, you are cleared hot. God help us all." Tank watched Ghost's hands move across her controls with the fluid precision of a master pianist approaching her final concerto. The Strike Eagle banked left, beginning a diving attack run that would take them down into the Valley of Shadows, where angels and demons measured their worth in milliseconds and millimeters. As they descended, Ghost's voice filled Tank's headset with the calm certainty of someone who had found her moment of perfect clarity. "Tank, I need targeting solutions on the northern and western positions first. We're going to give those boys a way home." Below them, the ridge waited in darkness, holding its breath for the lightning that was about to remake the night. The F-15E Strike Eagle descended through 10,000 feet like vengeance, wrapped in titanium and prayer. Ghost's hands moved across her controls with the measured grace of a surgeon, each input calculated to the microsecond. The aircraft's terrain-following radar painted the mountainous landscape in stark electronic relief, while Tank worked the targeting systems, his fingers dancing across displays that could distinguish between a human being and a rock from 8 miles away. "First target package, Northern Ridge," Tank called out, his voice steady despite the gravity of what they were attempting. "Multiple heat signatures, crew-served weapons, approximately 15 hostiles." On his screen, the thermal images revealed the enemy positions with crystalline clarity, fighters moving between rock formations, muzzle flashes strobing like deadly lightning. the geometric precision of prepared defensive positions that spoke of planning and patience. Ghost studied the tactical display with the intensity of someone reading scripture. The SEAL position was a shallow bowl of stone and scrub brush, surrounded on three sides by enemy fighters who held the high ground. It was a textbook ambush, the kind that turned elite operators into casualty reports and left families staring at folded flags. But textbooks didn't account for 23 tons of American engineering, guided by a pilot who'd made impossible shots a professional specialty. Ghost, Falcon 6-1. Kane's voice crackled through the radio, weaker now, edged with the particular exhaustion that came from watching good men bleed. We've got at least 4 urgent surgical, ammunition down to final magazines. They're massing for a final push from the west. Tank's targeting display confirmed Kane's assessment. Through the infrared feed, they could see enemy fighters moving into assault positions, preparing for the coordinated attack that would overrun the SEAL position within minutes. Ghost's breathing had settled into the rhythm Tank recognized from their most dangerous missions. Measured, controlled, the breathing of someone about to attempt something that lived in the narrow space between heroic and impossible. Falcon, Ghost copies. I need you to mark your exact position with infrared strobe. Acknowledge when ready. The request carried enormous risk. Marking their position would make the SEALs visible to enemy night vision, but it would also give Ghost the precise reference point she needed to walk ordnance to within meters of friendly forces. Ghost Falcon, strobes activated northeast corner of our position. How close can you put ordnance to our pose? Kane's question carried the weight of 16 lives. Too far and the enemy assault would succeed. Too close and friendly fire would accomplish what the Taliban couldn't. Ghost's answer would be replayed in military academies for years to come. Falcon Ghost, close enough. The Strike Eagle rolled into its attack run, diving toward the ridge at an angle that would have terrified civilian pilots and impressed even veteran fighter jocks. As they screamed downward through 8,000 feet, Ghost armed her first weapon, a 500-pound GBU-12 laser-guided bomb that would arrive with the precision of a sniper's bullet and the authority of thunder itself. The northern ridge was about to learn why they called her Ghost. The laser designator locked onto the northern position with the cold certainty of mathematics. Tank's voice filled the cockpit. Spot, track, laser on. Below them, invisible to the enemy, a beam of coherent light painted death onto stone and flesh with surgical precision. The GBU-12 separated from the Strike Eagle's wing pylon with a mechanical thunk that Ghost felt through her boots, then began its guided descent toward coordinates that existed in the space between salvation and catastrophe. 30 seconds, Tank announced, beginning the countdown that would determine whether 16 SEALs lived to see sunrise. Ghost held the Strike Eagle in its diving attack run, fighting mountain winds that tried to push her aircraft off the precise flight path required for accurate weapons delivery. At this altitude in these conditions, margin for error existed in the space between heartbeats. 25 seconds. Through her targeting display, Ghost could see the enemy fighters moving into final assault positions, completely unaware that death was falling toward them at terminal velocity. The mathematical beauty of the solution struck her. Precise angle of attack, optimal standoff distance, weapon trajectory calculated to place maximum destructive force exactly where it would save lives rather than take them. 15 seconds. Kane's voice crackled through the radio. Ghost, they're moving. Western positions massing for assault. Tank's thermal display confirmed the SEAL leader's report. Dozens of heat signatures converging on attack routes that would overwhelm the defenders within minutes. Ghost's first bomb would eliminate the northern position, but the western assault was already in motion. 10 seconds. Ghost's mind processed tactical options with the speed of desperation and the clarity of experience. After the first bomb impacted, she would have perhaps 90 seconds before the enemy realized they were under air attack. 90 seconds to identify and engage multiple targets while avoiding the friendly forces who were invisible to her, except for a single infrared strobe blinking in darkness like a prayer made of light. 5 seconds. The northern ridge held its breath, unaware that the night sky had already delivered its judgment. Ghost watched her targeting display with the focused intensity of someone whose precision would be measured in lives saved or lost. Impact. The 500-pound warhead arrived exactly where Tank's laser had marked it, transforming the northern position into expanding spheres of light and concussion that rolled across the mountainside like the fist of an angry god. The explosion lit the entire ridge in stark relief for 3 seconds, revealing positions and personnel that had been hidden in darkness. Through her displays, Ghost could see the Western assault faltering as fighters sought cover from debris and secondary explosions. Good effect on target, Tank called out, already shifting to the next threat. Western positions, multiple targets, they're spreading out. But Ghost was already moving, banking the Strike Eagle toward the western ridge with movements so smooth they seemed choreographed. Her second weapon was armed and ready, another GBU-12 that would arrive with the same precision as the first. Kane's voice filled their headsets. "Ghost Falcon, outstanding work. Western positions are still massing. Request immediate follow-up." For the first time in hours, the SEAL leader's voice carried hope instead of resignation. The night was young, and Ghost was just getting started. The Western positions had learned caution from their comrades' destruction, fighters scattering among the rocks like deadly shadows seeking deeper darkness. Ghost's thermal imaging revealed a more complex tactical problem. Instead of concentrated positions perfect for precision bombing, the enemy had dispersed into multiple smaller groups that moved with the fluid unpredictability of experienced guerrilla fighters. This wasn't the work of untrained militants. These were veteran fighters who understood how to survive air attacks. "Tank, I count at least 8 separate positions," Ghost murmured, her voice carrying the particular concentration that preceded her most difficult shots. "They're adapting faster than I expected." Through her targeting pod, she could see individual heat signatures moving between cover positions, maintaining just enough spacing to prevent a single bomb from eliminating multiple targets. It was tactically sound and personally frustrating. "Ghost, Falcon 6-1, Kane's transmission carried new urgency. "Western assault is still developing. I can see at least 20 fighters moving into attack positions. We need immediate effects on target." The SEAL leader's tactical assessment confirmed what Ghost's sensors were showing. The enemy was using the dispersed positions to set up a coordinated assault that would hit the SEAL position from multiple angles simultaneously. Ghost's response revealed the tactical thinking that had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments. Falcon, Ghost, shifting tactics, stand by for multiple precision strikes. Instead of attempting to eliminate all Western positions with area effect weapons, she would hunt them individually, using the Strike Eagle's advanced sensors to identify and eliminate threats one by one. It would require more time, more ammunition, and infinitely more precision, but it would also prevent the coordinated assault that would overrun the SEAL position. The Strike Eagle rolled into another attack run, this time targeting the southernmost position, where Tank's thermal imaging had identified what appeared to be a heavy machine gun team. Ghost armed a smaller precision weapon, a 250-pound small-diameter bomb that would deliver exactly the right amount of destruction to eliminate the position without creating debris that might threaten nearby friendly forces. "Laser on target," Tank announced, painting the machine gun position with invisible light. "Spot, track, 30 seconds to impact." Ghost held the aircraft steady despite mountain thermals that tried to push her off course, her hands making minute corrections that kept the laser exactly where it needed to be. The impact was smaller than the first bomb, but no less precise, eliminating the machine gun team in a flash of light that briefly illuminated the entire western ridge. Ghost was already turning toward the next target before the explosion's echo had finished rolling across the valley. 1 position down, 7 to go, 16 Americans counting on her precision. The tactical ballet continued with Ghost conducting each movement like a maestro whose orchestra was composed of laser-guided death. Her third bomb eliminated a mortar team that had been preparing to rain indirect fire onto the SEAL position. Her fourth silenced a sniper team that tanks thermal imaging had detected by their weapon's heat signature. Each strike was a masterpiece of precision, placed with surgical accuracy that left enemy fighters in adjacent positions stunned and disoriented, but alive enough to understand that something supernatural was hunting them from the darkness above. "Ghost, this is Overlord." Colonel Harrison's voice carried grudging admiration mixed with professional concern. "Outstanding work, but you're running low on precision ordnance. What's your weapon status?" The question addressed the tactical reality that precision weapons were finite resources, and Ghost had been firing them with the calculated generosity of someone who understood that ammunition shortages were preferable to casualty reports. "Overlord Ghost, 4 SDBs remaining, plus 20mm cannon." Tank's weapons display confirmed her assessment, enough precision ordnance for 4 more surgical strikes, after which they would be limited to the Strike Eagle's internal cannon for close air support. The M61A1 Vulcan was devastating against personnel and light vehicles, but using it for close air support required flying low enough to visually identify targets, putting the aircraft within range of enemy small arms and portable surface-to-air missiles. Ghost's tactical mind was already 3 moves ahead. "Tank, start identifying remaining high-value targets. We're going to make every shot count." Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had found the intersection between impossible and inevitable. Through her displays, she could see the remaining enemy positions had stopped their coordinated movement, individual fighters now focused on survival rather than assault. Kane's voice returned to their headsets. "Ghost, Falcon, whatever you're doing up there, it's working. Enemy assault has stalled, they're falling back to defensive positions." The relief in the SEAL leader's voice was audible, but Ghost knew the tactical situation remained precarious. Forcing the enemy into defensive positions was progress, but it didn't eliminate the threat or create an escape route for the surrounded Americans. "Falcon, Ghost, we're not done yet," she replied, banking the Strike Eagle toward another target. "Stand by for continued close air support." As the aircraft rolled into its 6th attack run of the night, Ghost felt the familiar sensation of time slowing down, her consciousness expanding to encompass every variable that would determine whether precision ordnance found its intended target or created a tragedy measured in friendly casualties. The targeting pod locked onto a position where 3 fighters had taken cover behind a cluster of boulders, their heat signatures visible despite their attempts at concealment. Ghost's finger moved toward the weapon release button with the deliberate precision of someone whose muscle memory had been refined by thousands of hours of training and dozens of combat missions. Another flash lit the mountainside as her 5th precision weapon found its mark with mathematical perfection. The enemy's tactical discipline began to fracture as Ghost's relentless precision took its psychological toll. Through Tank's thermal imaging, they could watch individual fighters abandoning their positions, running toward deeper cover as the night sky demonstrated its capacity for surgical violence. What had begun as a coordinated ambush was dissolving into a rout as experienced guerrilla fighters confronted an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't touch, and couldn't escape. "Tank, movement in grid square 478, Ghost called out, her voice maintaining its supernatural calm despite the complexity of the tactical situation. "Looks like they're trying to flank around the eastern approach." Her eyes moved between multiple displays, flight instruments, targeting systems, threat warning equipment, processing information streams that would overwhelm civilian consciousness, but had become second nature through years of training and combat experience. Tank confirmed her observation. "Roger, Ghost. I count 6 fighters moving east, probably trying to get behind Falcon's position." The tactical logic was sound. If the enemy could establish positions on the eastern ridge, They could bring the SEAL position under crossfire from multiple directions, making extraction impossible and survival improbable. Ghost's response was immediate. "Not on my watch." The Strike Eagle rolled into another attack run, this time targeting the moving fighters with a complexity that pushed both pilot and aircraft to their operational limits. Moving targets required different calculations, different timing, different precision. Ghost armed her 7th precision weapon while simultaneously adjusting for wind speed, target motion, and the mathematical relationship between velocity and destiny. "Falcon Ghost," she transmitted while lining up her attack run. "I'm engaging eastern movement. Keep your heads down for the next 60 seconds. Kane's acknowledgement crackled through static as Ghost dove toward the mountainside with the controlled fury of someone who had decided that 16 Americans would see sunrise regardless of what regulations or enemy fighters might prefer. The laser designator tracked the moving fighters with electronic precision, while Ghost compensated for their movement with adjustments so small they existed in the realm of instinct rather than conscious thought. At the moment of weapon release, target and ordnance occupied the same point in space and time, mathematics and violence converging with the certainty of natural law. The explosion eliminated the flanking movement before it could threaten the SEAL position, but Ghost's tactical assessment revealed a sobering reality. She had 2 precision weapons remaining, and thermal imaging showed at least 12 enemy fighters still in defensive positions around the ridge. The mathematics of survival were shifting toward a dangerous equation where American lives hung in the balance between ammunition capacity and enemy determination. Tank's voice cut through her calculations. "Ghost, new movement, northern approach. They're regrouping for another assault." The night was far from over, and Ghost's most difficult decisions still lay ahead. Ghost's tactical situation had evolved from challenging to impossible. 2 precision weapons remaining, 12 enemy positions identified, and thermal imaging revealed the systematic preparation for another coordinated assault. The enemy had learned from their losses, adapting their tactics to minimize exposure while maintaining offensive capability. Through her targeting systems, Ghost could see fighters moving with the cautious precision of veterans who had survived previous air attacks and understood that survival meant staying hidden until the moment of maximum violence. "Tank, they're smarter than intelligence suggested," Ghost observed, watching enemy movement patterns that spoke of professional military training rather than militant enthusiasm. "This isn't random Taliban. These guys know what they're doing." Tank's analysis confirmed her assessment. The dispersal patterns, communication discipline, and tactical patience all indicated experienced fighters who understood modern warfare's deadly mathematics. Kane's voice returned to their headsets with information that changed everything. "Ghost, Falcon, we've identified movement in the southern ravine. Looks like technical vehicles, at least 2, possibly carrying resupply or reinforcements." The addition of vehicle-mounted weapons would shift the tactical balance decisively against the surrounded SEALs, making their position untenable and extraction impossible. Ghost's mind processed the new variables with the speed of survival. 2 precision weapons, multiple infantry positions, and now vehicle threats approaching from an unexpected direction. The tactical solution required a fundamental shift in approach, from surgical precision to calculated risk. "Tank, I need targeting solutions on those vehicles. They're the priority threat now." The Strike Eagle banked toward the southern approach, Ghost diving to an altitude that brought them within range of enemy small arms fire, but provided the visual resolution necessary to distinguish between civilian vehicles and military threats. Through her targeting pod, she could see 2 technical vehicles, pickup trucks mounting heavy machine guns, bouncing along a mountain road that would bring them within range of the SEAL position in less than 10 minutes. "Vehicle targets acquired," Tank announced, his laser designator tracking the lead truck as it navigated the winding mountain road. "Range 4 kilometers and closing." Ghost armed her 8th precision weapon, knowing that missing this shot would likely doom the surrounded Americans to either death or capture, outcomes that existed in the realm of unacceptable possibilities. The mathematics of the shot were complicated by the vehicle's movement, the mountainous terrain, and the need to time the impact perfectly to eliminate both trucks with minimal ordnance expenditure. Ghost's solution was elegant in its simplicity. Target the road itself at the point where both vehicles would be most vulnerable to secondary effects. Her finger found the weapon release button as Tank called spot, track, laser on target. The 8th precision weapon separated from the Strike Eagle's wing pylon and began its guided descent toward a point on the mountain road where geometry and violence would intersect with predetermined results. The explosion created a rockslide that eliminated both vehicles and blocked the southern approach permanently, but Ghost's celebration was measured by the reality that remained. One precision weapon left, multiple enemy positions, and SEALs who still needed extraction. The tactical endgame was about to begin. With her final precision, weapon armed and ready, Ghost faced the tactical decision that would define the mission's outcome. Tank's thermal display showed the remaining enemy fighters had consolidated into 3 primary positions, a defensive triangle that could maintain crossfire on the SEAL location while providing mutual support against air attack. Eliminating one position would alert the others, giving them time to scatter or concentrate fire on the remaining friendlies. Ghost, Falcon 6-1, Kane's transmission carried the exhaustion of sustained combat. Enemy activity increasing all around our position. Looks like they're preparing for a coordinated assault from multiple directions. Through her targeting systems, Ghost could see exactly what Kane was describing. Fighters moving with the methodical precision of professionals preparing to finish what they'd started. Ghost's tactical analysis revealed a solution that existed in the narrow space between brilliant and insane. Instead of targeting enemy positions directly, she would target the ridge's structural weak points, using controlled avalanche to reshape the battlefield itself. Tank's geological survey data indicated the presence of loose scree slopes that could be triggered with precisely placed ordnance, creating natural obstacles that would disrupt enemy positions while providing the SEALs with cover for movement. Tank, geological analysis of grid square 479, Ghost ordered, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had decided to rewrite the rules of engagement. I need to know exactly where to place this last bomb to bring down half the mountain. Tank's fingers flew across his displays, pulling up geological survey data that had been collected for entirely different purposes, but would now serve as the foundation for tactical salvation. Ghost, there's a natural fault line running east-west across the northern ridge, Tank reported after 30 seconds of analysis. Explosive impact at these coordinates should trigger a significant slope failure. His laser designator painted the fault line with invisible light, while Ghost calculated the approach angle necessary to place her final precision weapon, with the accuracy required to turn geology into warfare. The Strike Eagle rolled into its final attack run of the night, diving toward coordinates that existed more in geological theory than tactical doctrine. Ghost armed her last GBU-12, while Tank maintained laser designation on a target that wasn't an enemy position, but rather the mountain itself. If her calculations were correct, the resulting avalanche would eliminate multiple enemy positions while creating terrain barriers that would protect the SEAL extraction route. If her calculations were wrong, she would have expended all precision ordnance without eliminating the threat, leaving 16 Americans dependent on her 20mm cannon and whatever tactical miracles she could improvise from mathematics and stubbornness. Falcon Ghost, take cover and prepare for significant ground displacement, she transmitted as her finger moved toward the weapon release button. This is going to get loud. The final precision weapon separated from the Strike Eagle with the same mechanical certainty as its predecessors, but this bomb carried the weight of geological warfare, an attempt to conscript the mountain itself into the service of American tactical doctrine. Ghost pulled the Strike Eagle into a climbing turn, gaining altitude, while Tank tracked the weapon's descent toward coordinates that would either validate her tactical innovation or demonstrate the limits of precision ordnance against the immutable laws of stone and gravity. The impact arrived with the authority of continental drift compressed into milliseconds. The GBU-12 found the geological fault line with mathematical precision, transferring 500 pounds of explosive energy directly into structural weaknesses that had been waiting 30 million years for exactly this moment. The mountain's response was immediate and comprehensive, a cascading failure that sent thousands of tons of stone and debris tumbling down the northern ridge in a controlled avalanche that eliminated enemy positions, with the finality of geological time compressed into tactical minutes. Tank's thermal imaging revealed the avalanche's effects in stark detail. 3 enemy positions simply disappeared beneath moving stone, while the surviving fighters found themselves cut off from mutual support by terrain features that hadn't existed 5 minutes earlier. The tactical situation had been fundamentally altered by an application of geology that no military manual had ever contemplated. Jesus Christ, Kane's voice carried all mixed with tactical appreciation. Ghost, I don't know what you just did, but half the mountain came down on top of them. Through her targeting displays, Ghost could see the avalanche had created exactly the terrain barriers she'd calculated, natural obstacles that protected the SEAL position while isolating the remaining enemy fighters into manageable groups. But Ghost's tactical assessment revealed a sobering reality. Precision weapons exhausted, enemy resistance reduced but not eliminated, and 16 Americans who still needed extraction from a hostile ridge that had become marginally less hostile but remained fundamentally dangerous. The endgame would require different tools and different tactics. Overlord Ghost, she transmitted to Tactical Command. Winchester on precision ordnance, switching to gun runs for cleanup and extraction support. Colonel Harrison's response carried professional respect that hadn't been present at the mission's beginning. Ghost, Overlord, understood. You are cleared for gun runs in support of Falcon extraction. Outstanding work. Ghost's hands moved to her cannon controls, while Tank began identifying targets for 20mm strafing runs. The Strike Eagle's M61A1 Vulcan could fire 6,000 rounds per minute of depleted uranium ammunition that would eliminate personnel and light vehicles with devastating efficiency. But using it required flying low enough to visually confirm targets, putting the aircraft within range of enemy weapons that could turn precision strike missions into casualty reports. As Ghost descended toward strafing altitude, her voice filled Tank's headset with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her element. Time to show them why they call me Ghost. The real air war was about to begin. The transition from precision bombing to gun runs required a fundamental shift in both tactics and psychology. At bombing altitude, Ghost had been an invisible presence dispensing mathematical destruction from the safety of distance. At strafing altitude, she became a participant in the visceral reality of close combat, close enough to see muzzle flashes and individual fighters, close enough for them to see her. The Strike Eagle descended through 5,000 feet toward an altitude where warfare became personal. Tank's targeting systems tracked the remaining enemy positions with electronic precision, while Ghost configured the aircraft for close air support. The M61, a 1 Vulcan cannon, held 512 rounds of 20mm ammunition, enough for approximately 8 seconds of sustained fire that could eliminate personnel, destroy equipment, and create the psychological effects necessary to support SEAL extraction. Each burst would need to be precisely aimed and perfectly timed. First gun run, target grid 476, Tank announced, identifying a position where thermal imaging showed 4 fighters attempting to reestablish overwatch on the SEAL location. Range 3,000 meters and closing. Ghost aligned the Strike Eagle's nose with the target bearing, while simultaneously monitoring threat warning systems for enemy air defense activity. At this altitude, shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles became a significant threat. The gun run began with Ghost diving toward the mountainside at an angle that balanced accuracy requirements against survivability considerations. Through her heads-up display, she could see the target area growing larger as range decreased toward the envelope, where 20mm ammunition became devastatingly effective. At 1,500 meters, she squeezed the trigger. The Vulcan cannon erupted with mechanical fury, sending a stream of depleted uranium projectiles downrange at 3,000 feet per second. Each round carried kinetic energy sufficient to penetrate armored vehicles, and against personnel in the open, the effects were immediate and comprehensive. The stream of tracer rounds created a visible connection between aircraft and target, a line of light that spoke the universal language of overwhelming firepower. Good effects on target. Tank called out as thermal imaging showed the targeted position had been eliminated. Secondary explosions. Looks like we hit stored ammunition. The psychological impact was as important as the physical destruction. Remaining enemy fighters now understood they were facing an opponent who could engage them with precision from any altitude, with any weapon system, at any moment. Ghost pulled the Strike Eagle into a climbing turn, while Tank identified the next target. Northern survivors, Grid 481, approximately 6 fighters in defensive positions. The gun-run pattern required constant movement to prevent enemy fighters from predicting her approach routes and concentrating fire on predictable flight paths. As Ghost rolled into her second strafing run, Kane's voice filled their headsets with tactical updates. Ghost, Falcon. Enemy resistance is collapsing. Most positions have gone silent, remaining fighters appear to be withdrawing. The SEAL leader's assessment confirmed what Ghost's tactical instincts had predicted. Systematic elimination of organized positions was creating cascade effects that disrupted enemy morale and coordination. The second gun run eliminated the northern survivors with the same precision as the first. Ghost's cannon fire walking across defensive positions with surgical accuracy that left no doubt about the Strike Eagle's capacity for close-range violence. As she pulled out of the attack run, Tank's thermal display showed a tactical situation that had been fundamentally transformed. Scattered individual fighters seeking escape routes rather than organized resistance preparing coordinated assaults. Victory was emerging from the mathematics of precision violence. The psychological transformation was as dramatic as the tactical one. What had begun as a confident ambush by experienced fighters had devolved into individual survival instincts, as Ghost's systematic elimination of organized positions created cascade effects that rippled through enemy morale like shock waves through water. Tank's thermal imaging revealed the human dimension of tactical defeat. Individual heat signatures moving away from the ridge, with the purposeful haste of people who had learned that staying meant dying. Ghost, Falcon 6-1, Kane's transmission carried a quality that hadn't been present for hours, hope mixed with tactical opportunity. Enemy resistance has broken. Most positions abandoned, individual fighters withdrawing to the south. We're mobile and ready for extraction coordination. The SEAL leader's assessment meant that 16 Americans had transitioned from survival to escape, from defensive operations to tactical movement toward friendly forces. Ghost's response revealed tactical thinking that extended beyond immediate engagement. Falcon Ghost, I'll provide overwatch during your movement. What's your extraction plan? The question addressed the reality that eliminating immediate threats was only the first step in a successful rescue operation. The SEALs still needed to move through hostile territory to reach a location where helicopter extraction was feasible. Tank was already coordinating with extraction assets. Ghost, Overlord reports 2 U-60s inbound from Bagram. ETA 45 minutes to extract LZ Echo. The designated landing zone was 3 kilometers southeast of the SEAL position, requiring movement through terrain that offered both cover and concealment, but also multiple opportunities for enemy contact or ambush by withdrawing fighters. Ghost's tactical mind processed the extraction timeline while monitoring her remaining ammunition and fuel status. 45 minutes of overwatch using cannon fire and the psychological effects of her presence. It was achievable but would require careful resource management and tactical patience. Falcon Ghost. Beginning Overwatch pattern. Move when ready, I'll be your guardian angel. The Strike Eagle established a racetrack pattern above the ridge, Ghost maintaining visual contact with the SEAL position, while Tank monitored thermal displays for any indication of enemy regrouping or reinforcement. As the Americans began their movement toward the extraction zone, Ghost felt the particular satisfaction that came from tactical problems solved through the application of precision violence and professional competence. But professional satisfaction was tempered by tactical reality. Her cannon ammunition was finite, her fuel was being consumed at combat rates, and enemy forces had withdrawn rather than been eliminated. The mission's success would be measured not just by immediate tactical victory,